Most of the people on the call today, the webinar, most of them are economic developers in Minnesota. We have a few others, but I recognize most of the names as economic developers. Many of them have taken our business retention classes through the years. So I think we could all agree that this is really the business retention moment of our careers. I mean, no one alive today has seen a moment like this, and it's all about keeping as many businesses as possible. And I think we all know that not all businesses are going to make it. Things are changing. So we're going to be grieving the loss of businesses, but we're going to try to keep as many of them as we can in our communities. It's really more of a business retention moment than a business expansion moment, right? So today I was thinking we just recognize that and also talk a little bit about establishing your goals for business retention and expansion in this moment. And I think it's important to realize that empathy, compassion, being able to listen to people who are anxious, these business owners, and feeling their pain a little bit, quite frankly. This is a moment for empathy. And finally, to point to a few resources. But just to kind of elaborate, John, we do. For anyone who doesn't know, if there are some non-economic development professionals on the line, business retention and expansion is what we refer to in economic development as the activity where we reach out to businesses, we ask them questions, we listen and think about what they said, and then we intentionally act to respond on behalf of the community to try to help them thrive, and stay alive. So business outreach is important in this moment because obviously that's what businesses are trying to do wherever they are in this cycle. Some are reopened, some are closed. There's a few businesses, of course, that have done really well in this moment, but most businesses have suffered to some degree, and particular sectors have suffered greatly. So Extension's been in this business retention, expansion, education, applied research space for over 30 years, as most of you know. So I'm feeling a lot of pressure, right? Because I'm the business retention guy and John and I are the kind of the team leaders. So I'm feeling like, whoa, what do we do in this business retention moment? Well, first of all, we take a breath and we realize that we can't do everything at once. And so we need to think about our goals for doing business outreach. And there's a lot of things that you could do in business outreach. You could be looking for ways to help individual businesses. You could be trying to keep businesses local. You could be gathering data to look at the bigger picture for a community. But I think at this moment, showing businesses in your community that you care, that you really care, is probably the most important thing. That's always been the first goal in the U of M's BR&E program. That's always been goal number one of our five kind of standard goals, is showing businesses that you care and that you and the community appreciate their contributions to the community, the economy. But I think empathy, rises to the top because there's a lot of pain and clearly there's a lot of loss. So you think one more thing, and back to you, John. If you want to show that you care, then it's kind of hard to do that through an e-survey, right? It's important to be in the moment, in real time with the business owner. Obviously, you can't reach all business owners at this time, but for the ones based on whatever you identify as your goals, to be there, and to be there could be like this. It could be in a Zoom meeting. It could be on the phone. It could be physically distanced, which appropriate, safe, face-to-face interaction. But it's really in that way that we can feel another human's emotions. And emotions are a big thing right now. We have a class that we teach, and we have people go out and do a practice BR&E visit. Well, the class is going on right now, and so we told people, we want you to do an interview. And so about 5 of the students did their interview. Some did it safely, face-to-face. Some did it on the phone. Some did it through Zoom. And about half of them said in their threaded discussions that they really felt the pain of the business owner. So it just made it more clear to me that this is an empathic moment. So part of the job is to listen to these people while you're also gathering data and trying to attend to your community's economic development goals.
So do you have any other suggestions? I mean, you mentioned empathy here, and that's really important. And we know that's important when communities are doing this, just demonstrating that the community cares about the businesses that are there are important. But oftentimes that may not be the reason that people do this work. It's to collect data, used to make decisions. So could you go a little bit deeper on empathy? Why is that important, and what advice might you have for economic developers or planners or other local people whose job it is to work with businesses? Any suggestions of how they might do that with a little more mindfully, I guess?
Right, and mindfulness is a great term, John. I think that our colleagues in the U of M Extension, and there might be some on the line today, but our colleagues in the Center for Community Vitality who teach leadership and civic engagement, they've been spending a lot of time in recent years on emotional intelligence. And so I'm sure many of you, if maybe all of you, have heard about emotional intelligence, but if there's a time for emotional intelligence, now is that time. And emotional intelligence involves several things, but one of them is empathy. One of them is being able to feel another human beings, to look at the world and to feel the world, just kind of see it through their eyes. And so emotional intelligence is something that you might want to learn about if you haven't paid attention to that. And so there's a resource. I set up a Z link just because we have these little shortcuts. And there's a website that I had on the opening slide, and it's z.umn.edu/business retention. And on that site, thanks Neil, there's a whole bunch of stuff, including some tools for BR&E in the pandemic. But one of the links is to our colleagues who've done they did a whole week of training a couple of weeks ago about emotional intelligence, and they have several good resources that they've developed and that they've brought in from experts in the field. So I'd recommend taking a look at that. And the short link for that, if you want to go there right now, is z.umn.edu/BR&EMO. So had fun with that one. But it's emotional intelligence is something they're finding that if children learn this in school, they do better. The ability to self-regulate, the ability to absorb and appropriately deal with distressful emotions, also to be able to channel positive emotions and to use that to thrive and to do well. So that's important for us as economic developers in this moment, to be not only intelligent, but to be emotionally intelligent. And I'm not an expert on this, so I'm learning too. By the way, our colleague Christy Kalavig just told me last night that if anyone in this session wants to learn more, she is happy to help them, and I can put that information, in that resource that I have. But there's several other things. She couldn't pick out one document for me, but I think it's an opportunity to prepare yourself. If you can go out and visit or interview businesses in real time, you're going to hear some pain. And that's a good thing. You want people to be able to express themselves, but you need to be prepared for that. And part of that is there's going to be some grief on their part. And frankly, there might be some grief. There'll probably be grief on your part. I mean, I'm feeling grief about the loss of a bunch of stuff right now. I like going to the office. I like seeing my colleagues. I like going to have a drink with a friend at a bar. We're all grieving the loss of a bunch of things right now. And business owners are clearly going to be dealing with that, whether they expressed it or not.
Thanks, Michael. So at the beginning, you sort of highlighted or mentioned that there's goals for doing business retention work, and we know there's a lot of different motivators or reasons, why a community may decide that they want to start doing this, or they want to beef up what they're doing. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of what some of these goals for business retention are, and maybe how some of those goals might be changing or shifting now a bit?
Sure. And, I alluded to the 5 standard goals that we have in Extensions program. And Extensions program, for those of you who don't know it, the U of M extension, that is, is a community-driven and volunteer-intensive approach to business retention, where we get a lot of people involved. It's kind of a community economic development approach. And because we have that really robust model, we have pretty ambitious goals. And so the first goal, like I said, is to show the business that you care. The second goal is to help the business solve problems. You know, we call these red flags, green flags, warning flags, whatever. They're opportunities for economic developer to serve, and the economic developers' allies, and the people in their networks. The third goal is to be to help the businesses become more globally competitive. You know, help build their capacity. Then the fourth and fifth goals in our program is to build a plan for the community. That's goal 4. Build kind of a strategic action plan. Let's say you visit or interview 50 businesses. What did you learn? You know, what are the big picture items? What are the burning issues? What are the more slow burn issues? But you know, what can you do to be strategic? And that's in normal times, right? That's when you have. That's not what I'm encouraging right now. But the fifth goal is to build the community's capacity. You know, to be better at economic development. So those are our standard goals. But in this moment, like I said before, I think the first goal, empathy and listening, is very important if you're going to be doing live interviews. But even if you're just seeking information, you know, I think you need to be prepared to for people dealing with the psychological aspects of this. But if you're not prepared to deal with the psychological issues and the, you know, the emotions, then you probably don't want to be in live space. You probably want to keep it distanced to you know, to a survey monkey or some kind of survey that's just about gathering information. And you might not see the best response rates, because I think most of us have heard that businesses are getting kind of bombarded with surveys from different angles right now. So survey fatigue is a real issue.
Anything else you want to say about like safe methods for outreach?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Your goals will influence your methods. And if you are going to go there and be in the physical space, you know, Mike Osterholm, our prominent epidemiologist who runs the CIDRAP Center here at the University of Minnesota, Osterholm's now using the word physical distancing. He doesn't want us to use the word socially distanced, because we need to be social. We are human beings. We need to show the empathy that I keep kind of dwelling on. We need to connect with people. So we want to be social, but we have to be physically distant. So, you know, following all I'm not with the CDC or Minnesota Department of Health, but we've all heard the admonitions that you need to follow all these health procedures. I do think that there's an opportunity to do face-to-face, but probably is not going to be the best resource or the best approach at this time. Yesterday, the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce had a wonderful webinar where they talked about the methods that they're recommending right now. And so I think they're using an e-survey through SurveyMonkey to gather data, and then they're setting up live Zoom half-hour discussions with the business to discuss the findings that are elicited from the e-survey. If I heard that right, it was a great webinar. They're going to be publishing that webinar and all the resources. And I have a link to their toolkit that's, again, on my document. But I think that's a nice kind of 1-2 punch that they're using there, of gathering data and then having a live moment, and they're having the chamber professional and some other community or economic development allies or partners be in on those follow-up meetings.
Great. And what about I know you created a few documents or resources here for people, and Neil has put them on the screen. Thanks, Neil.
Sure.
So a little bit about these.
Yeah, and they're all linked to that website. And so the first one's just a little thought piece. And so I'm just going to put the caveat out there that these are all written around April 20th. And as we know, things keep developing fast. So just remember, these are written about 3 weeks ago. But I think they're worth taking a look at. The first is a one-pager with just some thoughts about BR&E work during this time. The second is a comparison of 4 organizations' surveys that they were doing starting in March and April, including the Minnesota Chamber and the Minneapolis Federal Reserve Bank, but a couple others. And then finally, there's just a sample survey that I put together, kind of trying to synthesize from those 4 other organizations. So if Neil, you want to go to the next slide? There you go. So this is just a snippet from the one pager. So you can take a look at that. Then the next slide. So this is, I don't expect you to be able to see this, but this is the 4 surveys that we compared 3 weeks ago were Eric Canada's national or international COVID-19 economic impact survey. And Eric's doing some, he's the one who published this Synchronist out of Chicago. And he and a national coalition are doing a nice job. They're having a webinar later on today. So lots of resources out there. Then the Minnesota Chamber. Now this is their survey from 3 or 4 weeks ago. I don't know if it's still online, but they do have a survey. And then the Minneapolis Fed did a limited survey that's no longer published, but they had the results. And that was to feed their 5 or 6 state, Federal Reserve District. And then the International Economic Development Council had a sample survey on their recoveryoureconomy.org. So I just kind of analyzed and compared and contrasted those. So you can take a look if you want, if that's useful, give you some ideas. And then the next slide. This is just a little 3-page survey where I tried to kind of, just mix and match and put together something I thought might be useful for an average Minnesota community economic developer as a starting point for a COVID written survey, or we like to call them interview guides. So, you're interviewing the business in real time, or you could use this, like I said before, as a kind of an e-survey. Mm-hmm. So those are the 3 documents, and again, they're at that website, z.umn.edu/business retention, and a whole bunch of other stuff is there, including those links to the Minnesota Chamber and some other places.
Yeah, great. And I think there's a lot of surveys out there. There's a lot of different options, a lot of good options. And I think I might just throw out there too that if people want to chat further about a survey they're working on for their Main Street or their business community, they are more than welcome to reach out to us, either Mike or myself, or somebody from our community economic shop here too, that's closer to your region. That's great. I think it's probably a good time to ask people if they have questions. I see that that Neil put something in the chat here, and if you do want to ask a question, just go to the bottom, click on chat, and feel free to type that in there, and we'll get to that. Yeah, I think that's fantastic, Michael. Anything else you wanted to talk about before we dive into some of these questions about best practices or tips with your years of experience kind of in this kind of work? What other advice do you have for people out there?
Well, I'm trying to be humble here, but I think that maybe the single thing is to show the businesses you care and be willing to, I guess the other thing is you can't do everything, right? You need to take care of yourself as economic developers. There's a lot to do. I know you're all, those of you who are on the front lines are just working your tails off, and we really appreciate what you're doing. But take care of yourself. And so there's some other materials that our colleagues have about positive psychology and being intentional, being mindful, John, that word you used before. We can't do everything, at least not all at once. So showing the businesses you care, and then having some clear goals for what you're going to be doing in your business retention moment, realizing you can't do everything at once. So.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
See, there's a question in the chat here, Michael, if you want to take a look at it. Do you think this is also a good time to involve other community leaders in the outreach activities?
Sure, and hello, Karen. Good to hear from you. I think it's a great opportunity, and the Minnesota Chamber, I think that's partly what they're doing with that e-survey first, and then having a Zoom meeting for not more than half an hour we have these webinars at half an hour because everyone's busy right now. Does anyone out there have too much email? Can't keep up with your email? Yeah, we need to keep things quick. But I think, Karen, it's a, a great opportunity to involve other community leaders. You set up the moment for them to be able to briefly but intensively meet with these business owners. I think it's a good opportunity, but it's going to need to be facilitated, by you economic developers.
And
Okay.
I just want to add something into what you said there, Michael. It's also important to have that plan and have some of your community leaders, like people involved in a board, like an economic development board or a chamber group, or just that core group that is there, so that when there are issues that do arise that maybe are beyond the COVID situation, maybe they're community issues, that you do have that team in place ready to respond, ready to take action if you can.
Sure.
That's right. Let's see, any other questions? No other questions so far. I think
maybe that's good, because I pretty much laid out everything I could think of so far.
Let your brain here for this morning. Okay.
We have another question here. What are the tools you'd recommend we use to help businesses stay in business?
Now that's the question of the day, Sarah. I like to say that business retention and expansion, visitation or interviewing, that's kind of the information gathering. That's kind of the way of having a formal process for reaching out and finding out what the issues are. But, the whole thing about what does an economic developer and their allies do to help businesses stay alive, that's the art of economic development. So there's a lot. There's this slide yesterday that Kathy Schaff showed from the Minnesota Chamber, and there's like 20 different entities that she's trying to keep abreast of, that have resources and that have different tools, right? So that's I don't have any easy answer for you. That's an economic developer. But again, I'll just go back to, you have to make some priorities, right? You need to take care of yourself, because we're not going to save all the businesses, right? There needs to be some triaging. There needs to be some prioritization. So the community has to kind of, think, it just sounds a little harsh, right? But in any ecosystem, you can't, in a moment like this, some are gonna go forward and get through, and some are not. But then there's some on the bubble, so that could go through. And I think that's the economic developers' challenge, is to try to kind of reach the ones that you can make a difference for, but not thinking that you can save everybody.
Yeah, that's right. I think you kind of mentioned this earlier, but business retention work is important for a couple of reasons. One is so you can respond to these more immediate concerns, but the second is to kind of be able to get what's the tick of the local business environment, or what's the overall business climate, to kind of think about some of these overarching goals that the community can work on as well.
Yeah.
Do we have other questions coming in?
Yeah, we do. Becky, thanks for your comment here. And I was on a webinar yesterday that showcased the steps the city of Charleston, South Carolina was doing. One of those was to really push buy local programming, including adopt a local restaurant campaign. So I think those are great ideas. And do you have any comments on what you're seeing out there in the field, Michael?
Well, I'll just say hello to Becky, who's from North Carolina, and she's currently in our BR&E class, and she's going to be part of this BR&E effort to target retail and entertainment, accommodations, kind of the retail and tourism industry. And so those sectors have been really hit hard. So Becky and a few other states are part of this project to use BR&E techniques to target the entertainment, accommodations, tourism industries. And so this strategy of, buy local is easy to say and hard to do, right? We've been hearing that for years, and it's a hard thing to do. But I think at this moment, people feel those of us who have favorite businesses or restaurants that we go to, we know that if we don't step up, we may not see that business in the future. So it makes it really real. We did have a webinar a few weeks ago on retail. I would encourage people to go back and, well, we're going to publish that. I lost the recording when I was manning the controls that Neil's manning today, and luckily the recording was found. We'll post that soon to the webinar webpage. That was the supporting Main Street retail with Ryan and with Emily Casey's.
Michael, we've got about time for one more question here. And Sarah Carroll asked if we could share a slide. I'll tell you what, I think we can send out an email to everyone that's on this this webinar here with some of those resources. And Sarah Swente asks here, I sent out a newsletter to small businesses. Any tips for what should and shouldn't be in it at this time? Any tips for that?
Well, I'd say take a look at the webinars in this series, and there's a lot of other good stuff out there. But you know, so to Sarah Swente, you know, curate it. But there's some good resources in this webinar series. This webinar will be put up online in a week or two. But Sarah Carroll, that slide, I don't have access to the slide from Minnesota Chamber, but it should be published pretty soon, and you'll be able to see it there at the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. Or you could contact Kathy Schaff.
I want to thank both Michael and John for taking the time to have this conversation with us. Again, it's 9:30. We know that some folks, they're ready to go right at 9:30. So please, before you go, click on that evaluation link that's in the chat box. It really helps us out. It only takes a minute or two to click a few buttons and tell us how this went for you and give us some feedback. We'd really appreciate it. I just want to say, you know, a few things that I learned from this conversation today, just the power and importance of empathy, the importance of really having a plan and having a structured way to do BR&E during this time. Really, it's critical. And taking care of yourself is also really something we want y'all to be thinking about. And then I was really impressed by all of the resources that you shared, the links, the different things that you put together, Michael, and we'll be sending those out to you if you didn't catch those links today. We encourage you to use those, take a look at them, send us an email telling us where we got it right or wrong. We'd love to just keep this conversation rolling. So again, thank you for your time today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll stick around until about 9:45 and then we'll cut off. So if you have any further questions or comments you'd like to add into the chat box, please do. But thanks again for being here.
Thanks, Neil. Why don't you put up that last slide again, if you would, because that's got a couple of the key links.
Yeah.
And this must be the Sarah webinar because we have all sorts of Sarahs in the chat. And so you're welcome. I don't know. Is that Sarah from Oklahoma State? If that's the Sarah, I think it is. You're another one of the people who's doing the targeting of retail, entertainment, attractions, or accommodations. If you have any comments, or those are the sectors have been hit the hardest. So any tidbits you want to share in the chat? I think our colleague, one of our colleagues from the Tourism Center was on the line today, and so you can reach out to the U of M Tourism Center if you have questions about that particular center, or you know, those sectors, which we're all concerned about. You know, the travel and tourism sectors that have been hit so hard by this pandemic, they're available for you to reach out to too.
That's right.
Was this the slide that you wanted to have up?
No, the one, the last slide, like slide 6.
There you go.
There you go. So watch that webinar link for future webinars. We're putting together some future webinars.
Yes, you're welcome, Sarah Swente. Happy to send out resources. Again, you can find a lot of resources and information at the extension website here too that we've put together, and hopefully in a way that makes sense and is useful.
Thanks to Paul Thayers for that comment. hopefully maybe see you virtually at the NACDEP conference in a few weeks.
Or the BR&E conference in a few weeks.
That's right. Business Retention and Expansion International is a group that John and I are active in, and they're having a virtual conference that like the June 15th through 19th, and John and I will be doing some sessions there. So that's a resource you might check out. It's $250 for their virtual conference, or $150 for members.
It's a steal, I think.
Yeah, something that we haven't talked about too much, Michael, but I think any of us on the extension team would be open to it, as if people are working on a survey and they just would like to get some feedback on the survey that they're thinking about doing, or just have a chat about their plan. I think any of us are really open to that. Hopefully you included into just visiting with you, helping you through this. It's something we're all working on together at the same time.
Absolutely. Give us a call. We're all, any of us here, or, the rest of the extension community economics team.
Mm.
And Lance got a question.
From Lance. Do you see that?
Yes.
Any suggestions on how best to complete business interviews? Our community was in the middle of interviewing businesses when the stay-at-home orders were enacted. How do you maintain consistency?
Yeah, hi Lance. Lance is in Lonsdale, Minnesota, and they're right in the middle of their, what we call the Connecting Businesses and Community program when the pandemic hit. So we had talked about, getting together again in June, Lance, and figuring it out, because our traditional survey is quite an interview guide. It's 18 pages of questions. I still think that could be done, but if we need to kind of adapt in the moment, I think that's something that your leadership team and we could talk about and figure out, how do we move forward. You were getting a better response with your e-survey than you were in the face-to-face survey at the time, and so we were already learning about the businesses in your community, which things they were reacting more to. So it's a learning moment, Lance, and we'll be in touch. But it's a great question, and I don't think there's any obvious answers, but we'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. And Sarah mentions that she's got some of the ways they've used BR&E survey data to address emerging issues in the retail and hospitality industry. So I think we're going to take you up on that, Sarah. We'll reach out to you after this webinar is over, or sometime here. Maybe
That's fantastic, Sarah. Yeah,
I'm excited to hear about some of that.
It's called Create Bridges. This is actually funded by the Walton, or the people behind the Walmart, and so it's a program that in the South they've been doing to reach out to like I said, the hospitality, travel, tourism type sectors. And so now several states are doing this, and we have people in our BR&E class right now from Illinois, and Becky, who from North Carolina. There's people in New Mexico. There's people all over the country trying this. So I think with this pandemic, a lot of us are going to be looking to see what the Create Bridges initiative learns. I think it's a great opportunity for those of you who are on the front lines of that to share with the rest of us in economic development, what works and maybe not so much as you try this.
Sarah, is there any way we can unmute Sarah if she wants to tell us a little bit about the Create Bridges program? Or
I think she can unmute.
She says your internet connection is not stable. Maybe it's not going to work. But anyway, it'd be great.
Well, Becky's on the line, or Susan. I don't know if Susan's here. If any one of them wants to unmute and jump in, I don't know if they can unmute, Neil.
This is Sarah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I do have an unstable internet connection, so I apologize if it cuts out. So yes, we had modified a BR&E survey to really target those retail and hospitality tourism businesses. in regions in Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Kentucky. And we had actually just summarized all of that data and had begun sharing it back with communities to start strategic planning when the COVID crisis hit. So we kind of pivoted quickly to look at ways that we could address some of the emerging issues that businesses were facing as a result of the pandemic, but also taking into account the information that we learned through the BR&E survey. So I'll give you an example of that. Through our survey, we learned that only about 50% of our businesses had really any kind of online presence. And just given that everything is going digital, and even businesses who are able to remain open are likely conducting a lot of their business online, either through Facebook business pages or simple websites, that helping businesses that didn't have that competitive advantage really kind of skill up in that area could be really helpful. So we are actually here in Oklahoma going to launch a series of webinars for businesses to help take them through that process of getting a better online presence for their business. And then the other thing that we're doing is that as we're thinking about a lot of these retail businesses is that, quite frankly, health and safety is now a part of customer service, right? And so these businesses that have been hit really hard and have had hardships, in terms of resources as they're looking to reopen, we're hoping to help provide some safety signage to those retail businesses, either in the form of posters they can put up in the window or window decals that will just help inform customers of these physical distancing practices that we have in place right now to help us stay healthy. So it's just some, they seem like small ways, but we're really trying to just kind of step in and fill some of those gaps for these small businesses at this time.
Nice.
That's great, Sarah. It's wonderful to hear that. And, that's a role. Crossing the digital divide it hasn't gone away. And the digital divide, if this moment has made it starkly clear that many places in America, either they don't have the broadband or they don't have the skills, or both. And
absolutely,
that's a role that those of us in the extension, cooperative extension, have played for years. In Minnesota, we did that several years ago. And we're thinking possibly getting back into that. But it's interesting to hear what you're doing with your Great Bridges initiative there in Oklahoma.
Very interesting. Any other questions out there? Or anyone else want to jump in with a hot new take on business retention methods or what they're doing?
Anyone need some empathy? It's not an easy moment for you all right now, and I just want to acknowledge that.
Yeah, that's right.
With the City of Norfolk Economic Development, I just want to thank Michael in Minnesota for your leadership, not only for the folks out there, but for a lot of us across the country that are learning from your methods and from other communities, and appreciate everything you're doing with this webinar series. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mike. And that's Mike Paris, who he took our BR&E class last fall, and now he's helping teach it here. So he's being modest. And Mike, you will be able to hear him, see him at the virtual BR&EI conference next month if you show up. So he'll be doing a panel. Kathy Schaff from our state, from Minnesota, the Grow Minnesota program at the Minnesota Chamber. She's going to be on a panel with you, Mike. So looking forward to that. But Mike, you want to say one or two things about what you're doing there in Norfolk, Virginia, in this pandemic on BR&E?
Sure. Yeah, just very briefly, we're in the middle of a large outreach campaign. We decided to initially try to contact 1,000 small businesses. We have a team of 7 folks, 6 doing outreach and 2 business intelligence folks that are kind of guiding the effort. We have a few factors. One's revenue generating areas. We're looking at impacted sectors, geography, and inclusive factors, including making sure that we're reaching out to our communities of color and other areas that have historically left behind with economic development. And so we're about 700 or so of those calls in. We've assisted about 330 businesses, deployed around $250,000 in a local product, economic disaster assistance loan, and we're getting ready to roll out a grant of $2,000 each for businesses looking to reposition their business model. So we're really in the thick of it. After we finish this in 2 weeks, this was kind of a 90-day stretch. We're going to be looking for sector-specific and cluster strategies, and we're really looking to learn from communities across the country as we kind of retool our business plan, our strategic plan for the department and reorganize our teams about every 90 days right now. 1 year planning and 5 year planning sort of out the window. But that's pretty much what we're doing in Norfolk. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate the opportunity.
Great. Well, hey, we'll talk soon, and you're doing great work out there, so hang in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's the message we'll end our call with today. It's 9:45. As we said, we'll do the hard cutoff here. And that message is hang in there, talking to folks that are experiencing such stress as someone who has to take all that in and try to find ways to help, even though you might have very limited options to help them. That's going to be stressful for you, and we want you to keep doing the good work that you're doing. So again, hang in there and keep up the good work. Thanks, everyone. I think we'll call it a day.
Thanks, Neil.